Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. Apologies, we remain on load management, but we come out with a special guest, Ty Willinghans, one of the, I don't know, it's a fun word to think about, Ty. I'll try and think of something after you talk, but one of the best basketball bloggers around. You were in retirement, pulled an MJ and came back and wanted to talk March Madness, which is fantastic because Brian and I have very little to say. So anyway, I'm your host, as always, Dre Alvarez, known most places as Nerd Numbers. With me, as always, is my producer, co-host, and voice of God, Brian Foster. You got the Wisconsin O there, Brian. And then, as mentioned, our guest, Ty Willinghans of Barry Basketball Ratings.blogspot.com. Say hey, Ty.
How's it going? Delighted to be here. Delighted to finally be here.
So I've got a bunch of funny stories about that. I'll say this. Years ago at this point, Ty, seems like a decade now, thanks to COVID, you said if the Bucks won the U.S., that would have been weird. If the Bucks won the NBA title, you'd come on the show to talk about that. That I think was when they were up 3-1 or 3. What was it? They were up 2-1, right, against the Toronto Raptors.
Oh,
it was a
that's
foregone
right.
conclusion, right? And then what happened.
Maybe I put the kibosh on them.
Yeah, I mean, Kawhi, we're huge fans, and I mean, nothing personal, but I think at the time the Bucks had a director of analytics named Seth Partnow, who, as he got his job, so he had been working with the Bucks. He got hired full time as their director of analytics. As he was getting hired, doing the victory lap on Twitter, someone said to him, "You should definitely ask the Wages of Wins group, for advice." And he said, like, I don't care. He's like, I've never taken any advice and don't want to hear what the Wages of Wins group have to say or whatever. And I was like,
pretty open-minded.
I was just like, go to hell. I was like, I don't want the Bucks to do well underneath you. So it's funny too, because while he was there, they did moves that we approved of. I know at one point you and I, when we were talking, like I said, Giannis was a falling off the log decision. This was before he took off. So he looked good. And I said the extension was fine. And you said, I don't know, is it wise to give him an extension like that? Since we've only seen kind of half a season of star play. And then, of course, it's been one of the most obvious moves ever after. But so that happened. And of course, we're huge fans of Kawhi. We were huge fans of the Raptors years ago when Arturo and I went to Sloan. We had a shirt that said, if Masai Ujiri calls, hang up. So Masai Ujiri winning a title looked like a good. And then, of course, just from a narrative street, right? No player on the Toronto Raptors was drafted in the draft lottery. So
right?
it was a rough one where when it came down to the Raptors versus the Bucks, I was Team Raptors for a lot of reasons, including our boy Kyle Lowry. This was another fun one, Ty, going down memory lane, which we might do more on the show. Back in the day when Daryl Morey traded him, I called him out for it, and it's just one of those ones where he was in a book, The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis, where Daryl Morey is trying to talk analytics and say he was so smart and was overvaluing players like Kyle Lowry. So having Kyle Lowry win a title before Daryl Morey was, like I said, there were so many aspects of the Raptors winning a title that we kind of had to root for him, even though it cost us you on the show.
I can understand that. Of course, I bleed Bucks, so I had to go Bucks all the way.
Well, I was going to say the fun part about the Bucks, as you're aware, and they just added to this legacy, which is remarkable, is they're like the greatest loser in NBA history.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. They've had so many championship caliber teams who haven't delivered.
Exactly.
I never bothered to look at other teams, but they've had teams, and their 72 teams should have had a championship. They had a team in 1986 that should have had a championship. I don't know. Maybe they got it so quickly that there's some sort of divine intervention here that says we have to wait another 50 years after.
Well, you could, I mean, if what in baseball, if trading Babe Ruth, right, was this huge curse that was going to cost a franchise forever, you and Chris Ye might be two of the only people that can actually even list another player in the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar trade. Which is one of the most egregious in NBA history. Now, to be fair, even worse, right? This was in the age before restricted free agency. So they, strictly speaking, didn't have to trade him. They could have just said no.
Exactly. They never had to trade him.
But, and to be fair, though, if there was going to be the sit out, what they got in return, I mean, are you effing kidding me?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is a lot of people think they did well on that because what they do is they commingle the fact that they got Marcus Johnson in that draft. And who else did they it's the sort of Mandela effect. They think that Marcus Johnson came over with the Kareem trade. That did not happen. They got Junior Bridgman and Winters, a couple of okay players, and I think Elmore Smith, the center.
You've actually written a post or a Facebook post on it where you broke it down.
I think I did.
It was painful to read over that, and I mean, I think the reason it's not as harshly remembered as you mentioned was Marquise Johnson and then Sid Moncrief.
Yeah.
Staying on the Bucks and historical, which I know is the most topical thing for the show, but just like one of the most snubbed players. He finally got into the Hall of Fame, but just the fact that it took him as long as it did to get in the Hall of Fame was egregious. The first defensive player of the year, back-to-back defensive player of the year, kept the Bucks in contention in the mid-'80s. And if there wasn't this stupid were they out west then? I'm trying to remember. Was it the Lakers or the Celtics that kept him down?
It was the Celtics, and in earlier years, the 76ers. They moved from the Western Conference over to the Eastern Conference. They were blocked by – they gave Seattle, who was a pretty good team at the time, a real run for their money when they were just called the Baby Bucks. I remember my friend had on – he used to hang Sports Illustrated things on his wall, and he had that picture of Marcus Johnson and it said, "Brash Young Bucks." And he thought that was the coolest thing. So they took them to 7 games, but then they moved to the Eastern Conference. And then, of course, that was the age of they got blocked by the Malone 76ers, and then that was the age of the really good Celtic teams.
And then, that's the funny thing. You mentioned 72 and 86. If I recall, 72 had that Lakers squad that had, a 20 or 30 game win streak in there?
Yes.
Wilt and Jerry West on that team, right?
Yep.
Okay, tough to beat. And then 86, is commonly listed at this point. For those that know the show will know that I will say the modern day Warriors definitely beat them, but the 86 Celtics is often listed as one of the greatest squads. So
they were no question.
Yeah. So the Bucks just had the Bucks timing in it, but the last 2 years, right? 2019, 2020, both years they should have had a title. I think we're big fans of this. Correct history, Ty. And what I think is important to note in 2019 that people will forget, and I had the weirdest happenstance because I wasn't really watching games at the moment. But for those that don't know, I'm trying to remember the game, but essentially the Bucks had a chance to essentially close out the series, and Giannis fell over and got injured. And because he got injured, he exited the game, and then the Raptors missed like a shot that should have been rebounded by the Bucks and ended the game, and it went through, I think, 2 Bucks players, I think Lopez and one other. And
are you talking about the Toronto Game 3?
That might be right, and that's I know.
Yes,
I'm
because
fairly certain.
Middleton had a wide open 3. It rimmed out. Had that gone in, no team has come back from 3-0. I think they would have won a championship, and it was just that close. Well, give Toronto their due, though. I mean, they just played excellent basketball.
But don't forget, they had the triple bounce to beat the 76ers, right? Kawhi got like the first.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
First game.
That game.
Got the first game 7. Got the first game 7 buzzer beater to advance. That happened, and then let me check. I'll try and check really quick. But I think game 3, and like I said, I think I saw that it was either game 3 or game 5. But basically, when Giannis exited, I think the one I'm thinking of is game 5 because Giannis exits the game.
Okay.
The Raptors miss a shot. Yeah. So, no, I don't think that's it. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. But essentially, they were this close, as you're noting. Like the Raptors were this close to just going home early, and that doesn't happen. And then last year, honestly, it was the bubble, right? We had Chris Middleton come back.
Yeah, but okay. But the Heat played through the bubble. Everybody else played through the bubble. I think that's a little bit of an excuse that they're using.
No, I think it's what we said on the show. Like we discussed this with Patrick. Is we're not saying it's an invalid. We're not saying it's an invalid title.
Oh no, I don't say that either.
But I'm saying of teams that got hit by the bubble, I think Chris Middleton came back and said he hadn't touched a basketball right. I think there is just weird stuff in terms of bubble basketball where some teams adapted better to it. The Bucks is one, I think, not the Bucks, the Heat, right? Who was the player on the Heat that had like his own coffee shop that he was, in the bubble that he was doing?
Jimmy Butler.
Jimmy Butler.
Yeah,
Jimmy Butler had like a coffee shop that he was doing to teammates. So it's kind of like it's one of these where had the Bucks just kept going normally in a normal NBA season, I think they take that title. And I think bubble basketball was different enough, which just is what it is.
I think also they've gotten quite a home court advantage out of the new Fiserv Forum that they just didn't have anymore. If you look at the records, they're just playing when it's jam packed. They're playing quite good basketball. They didn't have that anymore, So
yeah,
but you gotta play with the conditions they give you.
But to be fair, I mean, just as a note, this comes up all the time in basketball, right? People say injury is no excuse. This is no excuse. It's like, no, those are plenty good excuses. And there is a big difference. The Lakers right now, right? Anthony Davis and LeBron James being out is a heck of a lot different than, let's say, Kuzma and Horton Tucker, right? Like that is a huge difference.
I have never been a subscriber to the there's no such thing as an excuse. Obviously, there are excuses. If the team bus went over the side of a cliff, that's an excuse. But it's an old sports cliche that coaches won't let go.
Yeah, and then I was going to say, do you have any thoughts on Coach? What do we go? Coach Bood, right? Is what we've decided to call him, right, Brian?
Yeah.
But any thoughts?
Well, he's Coach Bud, but his name is pronounced Budenholzer. It's one of those weird things.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I never thought of that.
So for those that don't know, you used to blog. You were a prolific blogger. When I first got into it, you were in the first I found that was kind of subscribing to the wins produced Boxscore stat mentality of analyzing basketball, which was refreshing. On the other side, there was a lot of the plus minus statistics. And of course, if we kind of look at how the landscape changed, a lot of the people that did Boxscore statistics kind of went, screw this, I'm going to go do something else. And a lot of the plus minus people stuck around, you included. You basically quit because of the lockout and actually held to your guns, which was impressive. And it was kind of a bummer, but you seem to be back. Like I said at the start of the show, is at let's get the whole thing. BarryBasketballRatings.blogspot.com.
Now I'm thinking about changing that to Dirty Sports Analytics because I don't want to imply that Professor Barry endorses it in any way or he likes it, but I don't want it to seem like this is him talking. And what I meant to do by calling it that is I think he should get more recognition for his metric because I think, frankly, he's the only one that realizes that when you throw a field goal up, there's a cost to it if it doesn't go in. No one else will grasp that. No one else will even embrace it.
But I want to give you just so we're aware, you're giving Dave Barry a lot of accolades, and of course we do that on the show all the damn time, as is right. But I want to give you some because here's some stuff that you've done that I've loved, and it's kind of stuff that if I had more time that I was willing to devote to this, which I know should make everybody listening sad. You've done some really impressive stuff in terms of basketball analytics as well. One of the things I like how you take the wins produced formula, you do kind of your own variant. And what you do that I like is instead of listing a player as this player produced 18 wins, you give them essentially a win-loss record, which I think is really cool because that is one of the counterintuitive parts, right? If the common line you'll hear out of us is a team of all average starters, right? Which would, if you're thinking 30 minutes a game, roughly 80 games in a year. If you got a player that did that at average at 100 wins per 48, that player would produce around 6 wins, but that team would win 41. That team would have a record of 41-41. So the way you would phrase that player is that player has a record of 6-6, which I think is very intuitive because, one of the weirder things is we'll say so-and-so produced 3 wins and then call them a bad player, which is counterintuitive. You go, how did they produce wins if they're a bad player? And you're basically saying what you really want to think of that player is essentially like a 3-6 record, given their minutes, right? If you had a team playing at that level that played full minutes at that production, that team wouldn't be a 41-41 team. They'd be like a 20-60 team.
Let me explain how I got to that logically. First off, I think Pete Palmer uses that in his baseball books. So that's I think where I got the first notion. But my thought is, if you're out there, you got 5 guys on 5 guys. If you're not producing wins, you're producing losses. There's no in between. It's either a win you produce or it's a loss you produce. So if you're taking up 1/5 of the 5-man player minutes, you're obligated then to defeat the guy that's in front of you, and if all 5 guys do, you win. Obviously, if one guy does to an exaggerated extent, you win. If you're not doing that, if the other guy's outplaying you, you're essentially driving your team towards a loss. So you're either outplaying the guy and you're producing a win, or you're not, and unfortunately that usually ends up in a loss. Now obviously it's 5 guys, it's a 5-man effort, but if one guy's not pulling his weight, he's not producing wins, he's producing losses.
And let's go on that too, because another thing that you did that I really, really enjoyed. You've been one of the few people that did the research I would have liked in defense statistics, and nothing personal to you, kind of similar to Dave, where you're a hobbyist doing this on the side. The sites like ESPN and 538, et cetera, did not put the same level of effort that you did. One thing you looked at a lot with defense was team defense, and noticing that a lot of defense is scheme based and coach based, something we're very familiar with the Bucks, right? I think you're the one who told me, right, Brian, that over at Crashing the Glass, he observed Jason Kidd ran a very, very tough defense that was very difficult to coach. And the only problem with it, though, is it was a bad defense because teams could crack it. And you know, that's when we get caught. But you're the one who knows that, because when you're trying to look year to year consistency, I can't remember, like this is back on your, I think, Courtside Analyst blog, you noticed that you basically said coaching scheme impacts team defense, and that's why defense is so noisy. So basically trying to that's one of the ways that coaches really matter, and not enough people kind of look at defense in that way. I think a lot of people get into, you know, Kawhi is a lockdown defender, whereas you actually looked at, you basically said the Spurs are a lockdown defender and Kawhi plays his role correctly there.
Well, my thought on defense is, in basketball, they don't hold you accountable at all. I mean, fans once in a while see, Glenn Robinson can't guard his shadow.
Both Glenn Robinsons. No, the younger's a little better.
Yes, the old one. But I mean, you could see things blatantly like that. But when Robinson goes in for his contract negotiations, obviously probably be mentioned with him, but otherwise, you know, they're looking at what you put in the box score, and there's no box score regarding defense other than you know how many points the other team scored. There's no individual accountability, so I think it's the coach that says either, hey, you're going to play defense for me like Skiles used to, or you're going to sit. And that's he once said that, and that's where I kind of got the notion is the coach has one button to push when it comes to getting a guy to play defense, and that is minutes. If you don't play defense, you don't get the minutes. So in some cases, they just let you know, they're not quite as drastic about you know, professing defense and coaching it that way, but some coaches are, and you see the effect that who's the coach that used to be with the Timberwolves, now he's with New York.
Oh yeah, Thibodeau.
Yeah, he brings you know, a degree of defensive improvement to nearly every team he goes to, because I think he says, hey, if you're not going to defend, you're not going to play.
I mean, the Knicks are mostly the same roster this year as last year, right? And they're substantially better on defense. Substantially.
Correct.
Although news, just lost Mitchell Robinson, so
sorry for that narrative.
He's promising.
And okay, last one, Ty, before we get to NCAA, because I definitely, like I said, want to give you your accolades. And you blogged a lot more. I think.
Why didn't my bracket turn out well then?
All right, yeah. Well, I was going to say, I'm buttering you up before I go.
I'll tell you why.
What the hell happened in the NCAA?
Spoiler
alert. But last one, very much like Ethan Strauss. So Ethan Sherwood Strauss of a Golden State beat writer named the Yay points theory at Wages of Wins. You named one of our favorite things. Now this has become in vogue. This is called like Moreyball now, right? The layups and threes. That's kind of the new in vogue correct analytics term. So back in the day, you came up with the term shit shots, and you basically way earlier. So let's see if I can phrase this correctly. Way earlier than mainstream, which is egregious in my opinion, but late enough as to the data have been around. Since 2001, we've had shot chart data. And I think I saw you write a post on this in like 2008, 2009. You basically said, hey, I'm going to Basketball Reference and I'm looking at, you know, where teams are taking the shot from. And essentially taking a shot from 16 feet to the 3-point line is just the stupidest effing shot ever. And then you were telling me you actually had this colloquialism before that specifically, but in the analytics realm, I've always basically known the mid-range shot, 16 feet to 3 feet, is a shit shot, and you named that back when you were blogging full time the first time during your Chicago Bulls stint. Now, I guess you're on your Washington Wizards stint, but you're doing significantly better than MJ did when he was on Washington.
I wonder where you're going with that. Yeah. Well, he. Yeah. I mean, the numbers are just too obvious. You know, the best shooter around isn't going to make shots from the 15-foot range that are going to equal the value of a layup or a three, or a decently accurate three-point shooter. So if you want to suppress the other teams, but do you recall when I came up with the idea of a turtle? No, what did I call it? Avocado defense, where you guard the basket and you push them off the three. So it's and then you get soft in the
that's
remember that.
So
I thought I was genius when I came up with that.
That is so. First off, I don't remember, but to be fair, just there's so much there. And one of the funny notes, because we bring up Dave all the time, is at this point I'll be talking to Dave about something and I'll say something. He's like, "Oh, that's really clever," and I'm like, "I know you wrote it," and I'll go find it. And it's like, "Oh, I completely spaced." So same note, right? There are so many.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
And that's the same thing. Is like there's stuff Dave's written I know is really good that I've forgotten. You as well, but avocado defense. That's the solution to Moreyball.
This was just before I went on hiatus for a decade, but I was coming up with the idea. Let me ask you guys a question. Are you amazed at how quickly this analytical proposition that layups and threes are good came into vogue? I mean, it was almost overnight.
Well, no, I mean it's effing stupid how long it took. So for what it's worth, we do have this accolade to our credit. Arturo submitted a paper to Sloan basically saying teams aren't taking enough threes, and lots of charts, lots of graphs went right into that. That's run by Morey, went right into Morey's lap. We gave Morey a shirt called Moreyball after the fact. We know Morey read that paper. Didn't get accepted, but we know that came about. So this is nothing new. And a lot of the analytics people have been looking at the numbers. And so when you say how quickly, it's kind of what I'm kind of more going towards is like, what the hell took so long? But I think the one nice part about it is you couldn't let other teams do it. Let me throw this out there. Have you seen the movie or read the book, The Greatest Game Ever Played? Golf movie?
No, I have not.
Oh, what? Really? It's a fantastic. Shia LaBeouf. It's a great golf movie. It's about the first amateur to win the U.S. Open. And he would be a well-known player, but who was it? It wasn't the...
Oh, it's someone who went on to become a pro afterwards?
Basically, there's I'm trying to think. I don't think it's the tea lemonade mix, but it might be.
Arnold Palmer, you're talking about?
Palmer?
I think Arnold. No, I'm saying this person came. I think before. It might have been before Arnold Palmer, but they came before a great golf pro. So the reason they're not well known beyond being the first amateur to win the U.S. Open is that. Sorry, way too much backstory. But essentially, in old golf, the equipment was really crap, and there were no rules about which golf balls you had to use. And there was a new type of golf ball that came about with a new core that just went way further. And essentially, there was a brief schism where old golfers weren't using it, new golfers were. I think very similar to what McEnroe and the tennis racket, right? Tennis rackets changed as well, and he tried to say, and it's like, no, you can't use the old racket. Like, sorry, get with the times. So I think that was what happened when you're saying, Moreyball, the layups and threes. It took off so quick because it's like basically two teams, the Warriors and the Rockets, really embraced it. And it's like, if you don't do this, you're just gone. So
do you foresee any scenario where it will become so in vogue to shoot the three and the two that somehow the mid-range will become so undervalued that it becomes valuable again? I've been trying to think of a scenario where that would take place. I haven't come up with it, but.
Well, I think the one key aspect, so the avocado defense gets funny, and it's actually self-named, like appropriately named, because I think something that people misunderstand about NBA players is how damn good they are. Because when we're looking at their shooting efficiencies, we are looking at their shooting efficiencies with them essentially running a marathon while having people 6'7" on average, at least, right? Body them around and get their hands in their faces and all this. And if you ever found even I think like Frank Kaminsky is a good example, right? Because we were kind of lamenting how his NBA career is not going great and he's not a great shooter and all this. Mm-hmm. But you look at his college numbers and he's a pretty good shooter. If you played a game of horse against Frank Kaminsky, he would torch you.
Oh God. My brother is a season ticket holder with the Timberwolves. So and he has a friend who is with the Lynx in their front office. He's like in the marketing department, not the basketball. But anyway, so I got down at the Target Center where they practice, and Mike Miller is down there. And I mean, I think you could blindfold him and he would make threes. Choo. Everyone's going in, without effort, it was just amazing to watch. So, and I'm thinking that's what you have to get to the NBA. You got to be able to hit them just like in your sleep.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the secret sauce to Steph Curry is that he has the same release and he can do it. And he's like unflappable. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And I think the numbers, I saw a really good visualization of this. His release is so quick. That's part of the secret sauce is that you think that you're going to get up in his face and the ball's out of his hand before you get to that point. Yeah, every single one of these. So when you're talking the mid-range, I mean, you look at players like Kevin Durant, this one pains me, DeMar DeRozan, Chris Paul, and I believe Steph Curry as well, right? These players shoot pretty well from the mid-range and probably get fouled a decent amount. That's one easily accessible piece of data we do not have that I wish we did. I know it's in there kind of with the play-by-play. You can probably put it together, but I want foul location, right? Where the shot was taken from.
Oh yeah.
Because I think to your mid-range point, taking shots that are contested that are likely to get fouled from mid-range or wide open, I think you can put together a player, right, that's got a 60% plus true shooting, which is well above what you need for that to be a valuable proposition.
Yeah, it would have to be something like that where they're just leaving them so wide open that they're making. I think 82 Games did a game chart study once where they said wide open shots go in 60% of the time.
That's it. I would actually have expected it to be higher.
Yeah, me too. But maybe, in a game situation.
I saw that too. Just a contested three is worse than a wide open long two, is what they're saying basically. Or for instance, a wide open average or bad player is probably better than a contested star taking a shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, it's funny where people are getting upset with like the death of mid range. It's just like what you should really look at it as is the death of shit shots, right? And that you shouldn't. These are things you shouldn't do, and that's you mentioned early on where you're like, Dave actually dings you, right? Well, actually holds you accountable for bad decisions in games. That's the secret sauce of wins produced.
I've got an analogy for you, Dre. I think it's like the running game in football. People used to run a lot more, and nowadays you're looking at the numbers. We've got great quarterbacks that can throw really well. We're saying, running is really not good. Throwing is just strictly better. But you do have to run for just so they don't sell out on defense, right?
Oh, and you're right.
The mid-range shots, I think, in the NBA are kind of the same thing. I don't think they're ever going to, unless some player emerges that can shoot like 70% from mid-range or something, they're probably never going to be better than at-rim or three-point shots, but you're always going to have to take them in order to keep the defense honest.
Well, and to be fair, you can't always get the rim or the three, right? It's this, that is one aspect of basketball that bugs me. It's almost footballish in that it's plays, right? These are, each play in basketball is ostensibly independent, barring steals and weird and long rebounds and stuff like that. And it's really weird where basically it's almost just like playing a blackjack strategy or a poker strategy, right? You're going to go, we're going to run a play that 80% of the time is going to get us a shot that's 60% effective. And then if we don't get that, that other X percent will have to do this. And so, of course, as you're mentioning, you're going to hit a point where it's like, our option is to take a mid-range shot or we're wide open from mid-range. So it's not going anywhere. And it really weird to me. I hope you're not on the bandwagon, Ty, of the old is better. Because, the Charles Barkley's, like I said, I think one way you got your name back in the day was you basically called Charles Barkley stupid. And this was in 2006.
Well, that's right. I remember that. That was great. That took me like 2 minutes too. I was just so upset.
You insulted Charles Barkley and they're like, why the hell is this guy talking about basketball? And it's 2021. It's 15 years later, and he's still saying the same stuff.
Yeah. Deadspin basically painted me as a raving lunatic.
Nice.
They call it should actually be called Diary of a Mad Bucks Fan. Remember when they had that old movie out, Diary of a Mad Black Woman or something of that nature?
Right.
They compared it to that, like, I was a raving lunatic.
That's awesome.
So I'm like, am I now under pressure to do these rant posts? Because I'm not going to do them, So I just went with what I went with.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in the clickbait era. That's the other problem, right? Is people go for cheap heat, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All right, I do not have a subtle transition, but we got it. The reason you wanted to be on is you wanted to talk a little NCAA. I took your advice. I made a bracket for the first time in forever. My only mistake, Ty, you did something very interesting. So I followed the advice on your blog, and it was, I think it actually was pretty good. So one thing you did very intelligently is you just went round by round and said, or not, or even just for the first round, you were basically like, here are the odds that a 16 upsets a number one, a 15 upsets a number two, so on and so forth.
Yes.
And kind of said, if you're filling out your bracket, you just want to look for those and look for good spots. And so, the easiest thing to do going through the bracket, right, is you just find all the ones and twos and you just say they're there. Unless you're trying to win $1 billion on some upset that no one sees coming, you're trying to win an office.
Oral Roberts, baby.
Is that weird?
Yeah.
And anyway, and then the other thing is, kind of getting into this point of like 8 versus 9, right, is like a coin toss, whereas the other, pick one. And I kind of went through that. And then you also, I believe, if you want to explain your methodology, you did actually just come up with a very straightforward list of rankings of the teams and just said, here's essentially their strength of each team. And so when I put together my bracket, I just kind of used that to guide where I would want to do an upset and that kind of thing. And then tried to pick a few clever picks later. And my only real mistake, the 2 mistakes in my bracket that I'll say using your methodology and your numbers, is there was a player on Michigan that was injured, and you said you might have to worry about that. And so I thought, looking at them versus CU, I thought those two looked close enough that I thought CU was in a good position to upset them at that point in the tournament. So I think CU was the 5th seed. So I picked. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no.
Well, what happened in between when I talked to you and I filled out my bracket was that all of a sudden Michigan was getting faded by everyone on earth. Michigan, they were saying, they're stumbling. There was no evidence they were stumbling. I mean, there was evidence that Livers was better than the combination that they had behind him. Yes, but there was no evidence that they were in a full free fall. And so I guessed to myself, people are not going to take Michigan, and Michigan has the numbers theoretically. I mean, and maybe Livers would come back to be that sort of dark horse contrarian pick that you need to win the entire thing, because of the way ESPN. Well, I do ESPN, but because of the way they weight it, every mistake can be erased by 2 good picks in the Final Four that get to the championship. So that was essentially. I said, well, look, now. Michigan's an undervalued stock. They came into it. I thought everybody was going to be picking Michigan, but then they lost Livers, and Michigan's hurt. They're stumbling in. Don't pick Michigan. And everybody in my pool, very few actually picked them to go to the Final Four, let alone go to the championship. So I'm saying, all right, I could see a scenario where they'd win. I could also see a scenario where Illinois would win, and they.
Oh yeah, Illinois. I was going to say
they went out in the second round.
Michigan winning like they weren't supposed to, and Illinois losing like they weren't supposed to. That's what's killed my bracket.
Yeah, I don't Illinois looked as good as you can look. I mean, they had wins. I think they played 24 tournament quality opponents, by which I mean either opponents that were in Lenardi's bubble watch, or were just on the edge of it. They had, I think, their record against them was fantastic. And then they got in against Loyola. They looked like a bad team. I mean, some days you just don't have it, and they didn't have it that day, and Loyola just ran them off the court.
Well, I think you even said something like that, like why there won't ever be a perfect bracket. And I mean, as a computer scientist, I absolutely love the permutation in small combinations aspect of the Final Four.
Yeah.
Because it's so misleading how quickly numbers go up, right? Exponential growth. If you have 2 teams, there's one outcome, and then add one more, it goes 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, right? At 5, at 2 to the 5th is already 32, and that just grows and grows and grows. And I know, like, I talk chess on the show all the time, right? The number of combinations of legal chess games is just absurd, even though you only have 32 total pieces. So the March Madness bracket is very much the same way. When you've got 64 teams that you're trying to do, and you're looking at each of these as a bit you can flip, that just grows tremendously. And then single elimination basketball, I think that's That's, I think, a problem people miss in sports is that even if you're viewing this as a weighted coin, I think in the NBA, you can agree or disagree with me. I think in the worst case scenario of playoff basketball, it's probably an 80-20 coin, where the stronger team should win 80% of the time. And then, of course, that's leaving out injuries, off nights, all that kind of stuff.
Are you familiar with the work Brian Burke? He's with ESPN.
Oh,
he used to do on.
We had him on the podcast back in the day.
Oh, you did? You did.
He's our
Great.
boy.
Yeah, I used to love his website with what was it called? NFL.
I think it was Advanced
Analytics.
NFL Stats, if I recall.
There you go. There you go.
That sounds
yes.
right. Yep.
And he came up with the idea that 50% of all games are basically luck. And if you look at any analytical model, any predictive model of any sort, the best it always does is 71%, which kind of feeds into what he's saying. I mean, 25%. If 50% of the games are won on luck, that means a coin flip. The stronger team could still win that other 25%. But the other 25%, the back end, is won by the team that is demonstrably weaker than the other team. An upset, as we would call it, and Vegas would call it. So you never know when those are going to land either. So you're almost guessing. It becomes a pure guess because any model that you come up with can only be right about 72 to 73% of the time. So what if your model has Illinois winning, and they go out in the second round, the air comes out of your balloon right away, So if you try and guess at them, if you try and use your model and pick it according to that, you're going to be wrong, in the 32 games about 7 times. So it's just luck.
Well, and I mean, that feeds something that we bring up on the show all the time, which is just kind of you make a smart statistical model and you trust it and you just accept that it's not going to be perfect. You accept that there are going to be games where, Steph Curry goes 0 for 7 from 3, even though statistically, right, with how well he shoots, that should have been 12 points. And you look in NBA games, like the difference between a made 3 and a missed 3 is so close. And I mean, obviously the rim in, rim out is, you can basically say that should have been a 3, right? Clearly they did everything right. And just by the physics, right? These minor amounts. I know baseball is the worst for this, right? Where first off, the difference between like a home run and just getting out is like a minor amount of trajectory, exactly like the same thing we're talking, right? Just a minor difference in the angle. And then one of the things that drives me
inches, millimeters.
Yeah. And then one of the things that drives me nuts about baseball so much, like Chicago is the worst for this, the Windy City, Fenway, because they're like an older stadium, is the weather on the day and the stadium you are playing in changes the value of a hit in baseball, which like just from a sports perspective drives me nuts. The same is true in football. Got to throw this out. More credit to you and stuff you've written. But like you noticed that the myth that the Green Bay Packers get an unfair advantage from cold games.
Thank you for mentioning that. It's a complete myth. There's no evidence to support that whatsoever. In fact, if you go back and look at it, and I didn't do it this technically, but if you go back and look at what the Packers should have done in these cold weather games, they actually did worse. They were on the verge of losing to a very weak Dallas team in the Ice Bowl, a barely still strong resurgent Packer team nearly lost in the Ice Bowl to the Dallas Cowboys in a game where supposedly the magic of the ice, brought them back. That didn't bring them back. Their bad Bart Starr's fumble cost them 1 touchdown. And then the Cowboys got another touchdown on not a flea flicker, but an option pass from their running back. The guy that went on to coach the Denver Broncos. His name escapes me at the moment. But the point is that the
Dan
Packers
Reeves? Was it Dan Reeves?
Thank you.
Cow.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Sorry, I just know these things.
Well, you helped me. I wanted that. They very well, without that last drive, they could have lost that game. And there you can't. And then all you need to do is put on the 2007 NFC Championship game. It looked like the Giants wanted to be in the cold, and Brett Favre wanted to go home, and he threw a pass that sort of signified that he might want to go home. So there's, but it's so believed in this, especially in this neck of the woods. Oh, if we could just get him here. What you're talking about is the home field advantage, not the weather. The weather really hasn't helped the Packers one iota.
Well, Lambeau is a crazy field for home field, and definitely a fun stadium to check out.
That's 100% true. The Lambeau Field effect is there, but it has nothing to do with it's there in the fall. It's there in October. It's not. It doesn't get amplified by the cold.
Well, think about it like this: the Green Bay players are not from Green Bay, right? Chances are they're from California, they're from Texas, or they're from Florida, most likely. Those 3 states. Right. Those 3 states are where all the football players come from.
But Brian, when it gets cold here, they like to walk outside in shirt sleeves. Yeah, right. They get right into their
not the Packers players.
Right to the warm grocery store or wherever they're going. They don't experience the cold. It's just such mythology, but
that was the killer about COVID. Is I'll say this, Ty. I think Green Bay, you and I are in the same neck of the woods in that regard. So I'm Appleton, you're Green Bay, and they're pretty close. If you look at like the weather charts of when like real cold freezes come in the winter, we're typically just to the left. It's really remarkable. Yeah. And I've heard since I've moved here, I've heard that the winters, global warming, whatever, but the winters have gotten more temperate. So I was kind of shocked because moving here from Colorado, right? That's what everybody says. How are you going to be able to handle the winter? Yeah. And they've gotten much easier. I had to get I've got, a $500 snowblower I got from Menards because you need that. Because when those, oh my God, I'm not the
but
people
you didn't need it this winter.
Oh, only one time. There was the one, but then it was gone quick. But yeah, I mean, these old people, right? That do the old metal. I see some of them out here that use the old metal shovels. I don't understand. And when I first moved out here, an observation I made is let's see if you do this right, Ty. The number of people out here that park their cars on the street in the winter astounds me when they have a 2 or 3 car garage.
Oh, that annoys the hell out of me.
And then their garage opens up and it's just junk. And you're like, you're using your garage as a junk thing and you're leaving your car out in the cold. What the hell are you doing?
They're dreaming of that day when they get that boat that fills that part of the garage. Yeah, exactly right. Oh, speaking of some of my old work, I'll bring up an oldie but a goodie, but there was one article I did once where I was trying to determine using the NBA's. Remember when the NBA, remember the old Kansas City Omaha Kings and that era where what the NBA would do was because it wasn't that popular at that time, so the Bucks would schedule 6 games at Madison. The Celtics would schedule games in Rhode Island, I think. And famously, Wilt Chamberlain he played for the Warriors then, but the Warriors were playing in Hershey, Pennsylvania that night.
That's where he got his 100 points. Yeah.
So I tried to see if I could deduce anything from that using the neutral game scenario.
Oh, interesting.
Deduce whether it's the crowd rather than the travel, and
right.
And I felt. I mean, I'm not trained to come to any according to Hoyle conclusions, but what I found was if there was both teams are traveling, let's say to Hershey, right? The Celtics and let's say the Knicks. They both travel to Hershey, so it has nothing to do with the travel. It has nothing to do with staying overnight. Both teams do that. But at the same, there was still an advantage about halfway toward their home court advantage for every team that played on a neutral site, a partisan neutral site game like the Bucks. Because they also, in that era, played what I would call like circus games. They'd have the Lakers and the Knicks playing in Detroit, just to gin up favorable press for the NBA. I know it sounds strange, but they would play these neutral site games with teams that no one in that area is probably a fan of, unless you're one of those fans that picks a team like the Cowboys. But you get my point. So in games where the team is playing at their designated neutral site, where you could imagine that there was a partisan crowd there, they would still have a winning advantage. And I took from that, and there would be none in the games where they played a true, what I call a true neutral site game, like I told you before, the Lakers and the Knicks in Detroit. They had quite a number of those, and there was no advantage whatsoever. But in the games like where the Bucks played at Madison, there was an advantage. They did better than they did in games on the road. So the COVID has kind of shown that out, because in baseball, home field advantage disappeared quickly. And I think in football, it was actually going to the road team for
oh wow,
quite a lot of the season. So I think it's now definitively proven that it has something to do somehow with the effect the fans have on the referees and on their judgment calls. 3 judgment calls. That's 6 points. That's a huge difference,
especially in the NFL.
Have you read the book Scorecasting?
I've heard of it, but I have not read it.
I don't know if it's Scorecasting or Soccernomics. One of those two books has an interesting point. It has another aspect behind it, which is soccer fields in some European cities and maybe South American as well have a sports track. It's very common to have a combination soccer field horse track combo setup, I guess.
Okay.
Makes about as much sense as anything else.
They have something like that at the Los Angeles Coliseum where the Rams used to play. They have a literal Olympic track around the field, so the fans are 10 miles from the field.
Well, you might want to look at the Rams then for some stats, because essentially what they found is on fields with a horse track around the field, the ref bias was lower because the crowd's further. And if you think of NBA,
sense. It makes absolute sense.
And the NBA, as you're pointing of all the sports, I know hockey, like the home court advantage seems to disappear in the playoffs. And part of that is, though, hockey, right, has the big glass separator, so the crowd can't be as impactful. But in basketball, you got Spike Lee within ref's ear, right, yelling at them.
Yeah. I mean, think about the impact that would have on a ref making a split-second call for charging or a block. He's got fans, 8 feet from him. I always believed that the Bucks lost a considerable home court advantage when they moved from the Mecca, the old Milwaukee arena, to the Bradley Center. And I think I looked at it once, and I think there was some evidence of it, because at the Milwaukee arena, you were right. It was sweaty. It was hot. You were right
the Mecca
on
was
top
great.
of the court. Yes. It was one of those old school arenas where they turn off the auditorium lights. Have you ever been to a place like that?
No, not
the first
recently.
basketball game I ever went to was at the Milwaukee arena, and before the game, they're dribbling, and you can hear the percussion and whatnot. Once the game starts, poof, poof, you hear these pops, and the auditorium lights that they have, they're huge, and they're all over where the crowd is. Those all used to go out. If you ever notice old pictures of maybe Laker games like Jerry West or maybe Oscar Robertson at the Cincinnati Gardens, you can't see the crowd. It's dark because the lights went out on the crowd, because they felt that
correctly,
I don't know why they did it, but my point is, when you are right on top of the refs, it makes a huge difference in how they call it. Not a huge difference how they call the game, because they do a professional job, but that 1 or 2 calls that can turn the game, they do.
Well, we got into this discussion way back, Brian. If you recall, we were talking 3-point shots, and we said we found an interesting Reddit post where the guy we're talking court to you, right, Ty? He made all these right arguments in his closing argument. We're like, what the hell? That was not the case you built, because the case he basically built up was this going he's like, wait a minute. He's saying that 2% in 3-point efficiency matters, but he's like, but that's only this, and that's only this much. So can we really say it matters that much? And I love how you're phrasing 1 or 2 possessions, because you think about that, right?
That's 4 points.
Yep.
Yeah, two incorrect ref calls is right. If we're going to be accurate, right, probably at 75 to 77% free throws average, right, baseline. So yeah, that's 3 points. So blown.
And you know how the point margins work. If you consistently 3 points better than your opponent, you're going to have a record above 500. That's I don't remember the number, but it's pretty good, and right there is your advantage.
Well, that's so like I said, there are a couple interesting ways, and your win-loss for season-wide is what I like. So what we did right, Arturo Galletti came up with this back in the day, the metric we use called points over par. Funny note, I did some shade on Twitter today where I said if your metric has PM or is named after a player, you might want to look at it. So I'm yelling at a lot of people, a lot of metrics out there. When we first came up with that, Arturo was trying to call it point margin, which would have had PM. We eventually called it points over par, but essentially it is the point margin. If we say, and we translate that at the Boxscore Geeks, we show their wins produced, but we also show their per 48 point margin, meaning if the player played the full 48 minutes, what you would expect, and essentially a 200 player would have a point margin of about +3. And so if you had a team, right, of all 200 players, you would expect to win by, you would win every single game. So that plus 3-point margin is absolutely huge. And these little things make an effect. I'm not going to lie. Brian knows from years of doing this show that whenever we talk NCAA, my goal is to distract from talking NCAA long enough to move on.
I think I was just thinking of that.
But I was going to say, one, I actually did have an interesting question, and I can bring a sports story. So I'm wearing a Milwaukee Brewers hat. And here's the thing that pissed me off. I got to see a Milwaukee Brewers game against the Cubs. It was a close year. It was essentially a playoff game. So it was a regular season game, but they were, they're the same division. So it was essentially a playoff game with how close they were in the standings.
It was full of Cubs fans.
And oh my God, I was so pissed because it was it was Daniels. It was my son's first Brewers game. You'll appreciate this, Ty. His first Brewers game. He slept. There were only 3 offensive plays, and he slept through both of them. And then we left early because he was a 2-year-old. It was in the sun. We didn't have it was too hot. He's in the sun. He's asleep.
If you're on the sun side, it's like being in a sauna.
Oh yeah. So we ended up leaving early. And so essentially his first game, there were 3 offensive plays. He slept through 2 of them, and we were at the beach eating ice cream for the 3rd one, but that was it. And the Cubs won too. So, he didn't choose the best first game, but
still
what you're saying,
ballpark.
It was fun. It was a good one. And then, but what I was going to say about that is the home court, right? When you're talking I love that term, partisan home court, because that's another funny aspect about Milwaukee. If the freaking Bulls ever become a real team again, right? It is not that far for someone from Chicago to come down to Milwaukee, relative to, me even, right? It's an hour and a half. It's 3 hours for me to get to Chicago. It's an hour and a half for me to get to Milwaukee. So it's not that much different for someone from Chicago to come out here. So I could see a Bulls playoff game against the Bucks if the Bulls ever become anything again and the Bucks stay good, where the home court's kind of iffy because there's too many fans.
I was at one of those games. The
Which
year
one?
was
Which year?
1991, maybe.
You got to see it. 91.
Jordan Bulls. Fred Roberts was on the Bucks, and so was, I think, what's his name? Frank. I don't remember. But it was the Jordan Bulls. It was Bulls fans. There was no Bucks fans. Or the Bucks fans were very quiet if they were there. But it was like the Rolling Stones were in town, though. I didn't. It's the Cub games that really get me going, because it makes us look like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in the day, where their stadium was filled with Packer fans.
Trying to look at did you get to see Jordan's Ascension? Because I'm not seeing that they played.
Go back. Okay, hang on. I'll get on there.
It wasn't 90,
it was
91?
a first round series. I want to say it was the first series ever at the Bradley Center, as I recall. And my buddy's dad got tickets.
So you just missed the Ascension. That was 1989, 1990. And yeah, the 3-1 Bulls took it down 3-1. So 1990. So you just missed Jordan's Ascension. They fell to the Pistons.
Oh,
in 7
you could
games
see it coming though. You could see it coming. They had Pippen on the team that year, I remember, and they were. Did they have Horace Grant? I don't think they did.
Yeah, they had to have, right? That's.
I thought they had the guy from
Horace Grant. Horace Grant, 15 points, 9.5 rebounds, 2. That's like pinnacle Horace Grant.
Who were they missing then? Why did they? Or they just couldn't get past the Pistons? Huh?
Seven games. I mean, they made it to the conference finals. Won 7 games against Detroit.
Pippen was young still. Well, I guess Jordan was too, but
yeah. But man, it was usually something like that would upset me, but I wasn't upset at all, because I was like, there was like a glow coming off of Jordan, I mean, seeing him, I saw Larry Bird in his, play against the Bucks in a playoff game where he took a 3-pointer and walked off the court. It was like right at the buzzer, just like right in your face, basically. And he just buries a corner 3 and then just walks right to the locker room. Game over.
I'm trying to guess which game, because I'm guessing it wasn't game 3, because in game 3, MJ pulled down.
The Bucks
points.
lost. I recall that. Hang on, let me try myself.
So game 4, when they actually put him away, Jordan put up a pedestrian 25, 5, and 6. Game before, though, he put up 48 points, and I'm willing to bet it wasn't the 48-point game.
No, I would have remembered that.
And
what
honestly,
year are you looking at?
That's 89, 90. Yeah.
Yes, it was one of the games where I remember going there thinking, well, the Bucks aren't out of it yet. You know what I mean? But no, that wouldn't make sense because the first two games would be in Chicago, so they'd be down 2-0. Oh wait, okay, so they got clobbered. They won a little close. I think it was probably game 3. No, it wasn't game 3 because
it had to have been game 4.
Oh,
I refused. You would have remembered 48
it has to
points.
be. Yeah, well, it's not a Bucks win. I know that, but I don't recall that. Maybe it did clinch the series, and I didn't really care.
Oh wait, Jordan put down 48. Oh, this is stellar NCAA. Jordan put down 48 points in a loss to the Bucks. That's actually I gotta say, you can't. That might be why you thought they weren't out of it, because it was 2-1, and Jordan.
But the Bucks did not. The Bucks did not win. I can remember. I think.
No, so I'm saying game 4 they lost, and the series was over. And I'm saying the game before Jordan put up 48. They took them down, so it's a 2-1 series. It's a 2-1 series. The Bucks aren't dead yet. But what we're forgetting, for people that don't remember this, back in the day, the NBA used to be best of 5 in round 1.
Yes.
So in modern day, they would have gone on to play another game, but in that one they went out. But that's impressive. And the name drop one, I actually invited you to this game, Ty. I got to see Clayton Kershaw down the Milwaukee Brewers.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, he came in as a reliever, so that's my name droppy game 1 is I didn't get to see Clayton Kershaw pitch. He's one of my favorite pitchers, but they brought him in as a reliever in game 7, and
you invited me to game 7 and I said no.
I don't think you were around. I got
okay.
This was a weird thing where I think it was late in the day, and that was the weird thing too.
Okay.
They weren't great seats. I think you saw them. You commented on them, but I think
playoffs are the playoffs.
There was a wedding going on, so that was the other weird thing. Is I was calling friends up, being like, "Do you want to go see the Brewers?" And no one was around, and it turned out it made sense. All of them had a wedding, and we had said no because we had the little guy. But Karen was nice enough to let me out. I was like, "Can I go see the Brewers? And you'll take them for the night." And she was like, "Yeah, that's."
You're like my dad. My brother was born on December 29th back in the day, and he was at a Bucks game 2 nights later.
No,
he's never lived that one down.
Daniel was old. This wasn't me leaving Karen alone with the brand newborn, but this was, he was younger, so we weren't going out as much. And if someone's like, "Hey, do you want to come up to a wedding?"
Sure.
That's 2 or 3 hours away, it's like, hell no. So.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I've got to ask one last thing on the NCAA.
Sure.
Sorry. That was a fun detraction for me. Bare minimum, I'll enjoy listening to that back, and no one else on the podcast does. Any players you're seeing in the NCAA, because you, unlike us, do tend to look at prospects, and I think
Timme, I thank you. I've been waiting for someone to say Timmy's going to be good.
I can't believe that people don't recognize he's the best player in college basketball.
The numbers are there. He looks great.
One question I have is he's a senior, right?
I don't.
He's a senior, I believe.
No, he's a sophomore. Timmy's a sophomore.
Oh, no. Who am I thinking? Sorry. I got that wrong. So on Gonzaga.
You thinking of Kispert?
Yeah, that's
Kispert's a senior, yep.
So
Okay.
Kispert. Timme, though, sophomore, that's plenty good.
People should be going nuts about Timme.
His skill is ridiculous.
Like Larry Bird.
He just takes the ball, dribbles to the basket like he's 6'10". Like, he is really good.
So
really athletic.
You go back and look at. I just watched the Larry Bird game against DePaul in the Final Four. Timme looks better than Bird did. Well, not from the long distance. Bird could hit those, but in all other aspects, I mean, I don't understand. It might be a Russell Wilson thing where they're categorizing him absent his performance. But
do you know if he's even going out to the draft this year? He may be playing another year.
No idea.
He should, though.
Yeah.
He's
for
ready.
what it's worth, this is Dave Barry's research, which basically says reaching the Final Four nets you 8 spots. Reaching the finals nets you, I think, another 4. So essentially,
wow,
if you make the Final Four, or
You're hot.
basically there is no reason, conceivably, the level you would have to improve your stats if you're not already a de facto number 1 to go back to school after making the Final Four or the finals is ludicrously low. So his stock will never be higher unless he basically doubles his points per game, and that's just not going to happen. That was an interesting one, by the way. The Toronto Raptors, they got Andrea Bargnani, and I think what happened is Noah was possibly going to come out that season, Joakim Noah, And I think he would have gone 1, and he went back to school, and the numbers bear this out. He ended up going number 9, despite the fact that he and Al Horford were back to back, and Mike Miller, as you noted, right, Brian?
Yep.
Back to back NCAA champs. So if you make the Final Four, don't go back to school. And to your point, this is a guy we'd love to see on a team. Who is the guy that we think is it Colby Brooks? Like there is a landmine on Gonzaga when I was looking at shooting efficiency.
Oh, all of Gonzaga looks really good to me. At least the prospects. Kispert has really good numbers. Well, Suggs' 3-point shooting we're a little worried about, but his 2-point shooting is great. I don't know. You might be thinking of Suggs.
Before the tournament, I was trying to look for anything I could find that was a trait of a team that gets to the Final Four. So I decided that one trait might be that a lot of minutes are allocated to players who are really high efficient shooters. So I picked the number, I don't remember why, but I picked the number 59%, and I looked at what the percentage of player minutes allocated to players shooting over 59% were, and Gonzaga's were because that's pretty good, 59%. It was 78%. I think it was possibly the highest of any of the teams.
All those guys can shoot. They don't have great competition either in their regular season, but of course they do now.
Yeah.
They just played against Evan Mobley, so.
When you have a lot of depth, if one guy's having a bad night, I mean, the Badgers had that when they went to back-to-back Final Fours. They had a couple guys who could score the basketball. So if one guy's not having a good night, you can turn to a different guy.
Yeah.
I was going to say that.
This year they didn't. They had one guy, and he was not even on that often to begin with. So they had nobody to turn to.
I was going to say the only thing I like. It was cool when the year I came out here is when they actually upset was it Kentucky? Or
yes.
Kansas. I always get it was Kentucky. Brett Barrett, man. And they couldn't put it away. So what was it all for?
But they had probably the hardest trek to a championship of any team of all time. They had to get through number one. I think they had to get through 3 number 1 seeds.
Wow.
They had Arizona in the West Finals. Then they had the mighty. Remember how good Kentucky was? They were seen as unbeatable on that night before the Badgers beat them. Then they had to turn around 2 nights later and play a Duke team that was fantastic. So I'm just going to put it in my mind that they ran out of steam.
And I mean, also we talk about this all the time, why sports is just so stupid because of how thin you're cutting the margins, right? Like how amazing that season is, and it's going to be considered a loss, even though, they made it all the way.
Isn't that strange?
Well, I assume you're in the same boat about LeBron James, right? LeBron James, quote unquote, only winning 4 finals out of his 9. People will hold that against me. You're like, he made 9 finals. Like, do you understand how hard it is to make?
It's like, would it be better if he didn't make these? It's like, but I used to be. I've been a Packer fan all my life, so I went through the dark ages when they never made the playoffs. And at the end of the season, I could tell myself, yeah, they did okay. They got 7 wins or whatever.
Don Mikowski got the job done.
That's right. That was like a miracle season, and they didn't make the playoffs. And it turned out they really weren't that good. But anyway, now that they're good, it's heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak every playoffs. Either you win the Super Bowl or you have a bad taste in your mouth at the end of the season.
I told you what I did this year, right? So instead of watching the Packers lose, I played in a chess tournament and I won it. So I chose good that weekend.
You won a chess tournament? Wow.
It was an online one.
How long did those take?
Oh, it took forever.
Oh my God.
In fact, I'm changing up. Brian will appreciate this. So one of our favorites on the show, a guy named Hikaru Nakamura, 5-time U.S. champion. He's really good at rapid and blitz. And so at this point, the type of tournaments I want to play are rapid. Those are much quicker because over the board
like
ones.
The kind they play at the park?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
oh.
But
I don't know how you do that.
Rapid is 10 to 15 minutes. So that's not bad. Because if you think a normal chess game is going to take somewhere between 30 and 50 moves a player. One of the things a lot of these do is increment moves. So you're not going to run out of time. You get 5 to 10 seconds to move. So no matter what, you always have a little bit of time to think. But I mean, if you think about 15 minutes to make 50 moves, that's not too horrible, right? You get like 30 seconds to think. So that's still plenty of time. But at least the tournaments move quickly because, some of these tournaments that have classical controls, which might take an hour or two for a tournament, that'll take a day or two. I've done a couple of those.
When you're playing slow chess, are you looking at the board and calculating every ramification of every possible move you have out there?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, you basically want to prune it, and then a lot of it turns into pattern recognition. And then some of it's intuition, right? There's like knowing what looks good or bad.
Sure.
But like the top chess players essentially are computers. There's a guy that US player, Fabiano Caruana, made it all the way to the world championship. Arguably, right? You could call it a tie. He actually drew that, but then they have an overtime, which is even sillier than the football overtime. And some of the former world champions.
Overtime in chess?
The former world champions don't like it. They're like, this is stupid. And I agree. Basically, yeah, I basically think it should just be, defender holds, right? If you're the defending champion and you draw, you keep the title, right? The other person has to get a win. But they have some other stupid stuff. But yeah, to your point, I agree. So you're on you agree with Anatoly Karpov, one of the greatest chess champions ever. He's in the same boat.
Well, so. I'm in rare company. The one that's the worst though, to my mind, is hockey, because you're not even playing the same sport when it's in overtime. I guess soccer does the same thing, but at least in football, you have to stop them in a regular play. I mean, I know they give you the 25-yard line or whatever in college overtime, but at least you have to stop them and in a regular play. In hockey, the guy's coming streaming at the goalie, 90 miles an hour, and he's trying to fake him out. A play that, on a breakaway that would happen, but it's essentially a different sport they're playing then.
Yeah,
it's like if the NBA busted out and said, "Hey, we're gonna have overtime. We're gonna have a game of hustle here. Get your 3 best players from each unit out there, make it, take it."
Yep.
I mean, it's just a complete. It's outside the sport, and I understand that fans love it, but.
Well, it's just saying we don't want ties, and how do we do it? And hockey's one of those, right? Even basketball, the odds that you're gonna we had that quadruple overtime. The Nuggets, that was a heartbreaker. They would have gone to the conference finals if they had took that game against Portland. But it's very rare to see that, right? Triple overtime, super rare. Just wanting to do something, and it makes sense, right? I think.
Yeah, I understand. I understand the reasoning. They want to get a winner, and they don't want to sit there all night to have to get it.
But I agree. The purity, right? I agree. Which we get silly when we're talking purity of sports that are all silly to begin with.
Before the NFL went to overtime, they used to have like the Packers were 3, 5, and 6. They'd have these ridiculous records where they had multiple ties on their record. So it's a better outcome, obviously. But I'm just saying it's almost like playing a different sport. And you were playing like having a dunk contest at the end of that wouldn't make sense, but you know what I mean.
And speaking of which, we are entering overtime on the show. Avoided the NCAA mostly. Did want to at least throw a couple out there and we'll talk NBA really quick because I'm actually excited. So 3 trades I want to discuss. You brought one up, which makes me sad. Jeff Teague to the Bucks, because Milwaukee, of course. Aaron Gordon to the Nuggets. I'm so actually excited about that. And the Golden State Warriors stay in place because I want to promote a piece. So just to kind of go bonus round, Jeff Teague just looks really weird. I don't know where your head's at about this, but the Bucks have just been pissing me off in wasting Giannis's prime. I don't know if you would agree with me here, but I was incensed that they let Malcolm Brogdon out the door. They should have made, as we mentioned at the start of the show, they should have made the finals. It was just bad luck, right? Toronto was a great team that hit the right breaks. What you're saying, right? Brian Burke, it all comes down to luck. Triple bounce to win a Game 7 buzzer beater. Giannis going down injured in the right circumstance that would have completely changed the outcome. Those 2 things get the Raptors a title they wouldn't have got otherwise. My opinion was you just run it back, and they decided not to do that. And then even this year, they're letting other players, it's ticking me off. And Jeff Teague is not what they need. So I didn't understand that move at all.
Well, you have cap issues, and I understand that, but it seems like some teams, if they want to fit a guy, they'll fit a guy. I mean, the Lakers are picking up Drummond now, and the Bucks are picking up Teague, somebody that's kind of washed up, And I was upset that when they lost George Hill, I thought he was a very quality backup and the kind of guy you like in the playoffs. But
George Hill played really well. I was kind of surprised. So I've got a bit of a bone against Daryl Morey because I think he gets more credit and has made similar, has wasted the amount of talent that guy has to not have a ring, even factoring in bad luck, is egregious in my mind. To have T-Mac and Yao, and then get Dwight and James Harden, and then get CP3 and James Harden, and now he has Ben Simmons, and for the first time in his career, possibly healthy, although I think he's injured as of this recording, Joel Embiid. Ridiculous set, and to never even make a finals with that collection of talent is ridiculous. And he was getting mocked for not getting Kyle Korver, and what annoys me slightly is, though, the 76ers did pick up George Hill. When I went over the numbers, George Hill still looks productive. I think under the correct coaches, George Hill is a good player. So that made me sad, because had the 76ers not picked up George Hill this trade deadline, I would get to relentlessly mock them for not picking up Kyle Korver, or not Kyle Korver, Kyle Lowry. Sorry, I'm thinking old school with Kyle Korver. But as is, I don't get to do that. I could say Morey made a good move, but yeah, the Bucks just are not. They're just insurance pieces, you could call it, right? They're still a contender, right? They're a top 3 seed. I think their SRS is top of the East. But when you're a great team and you don't pick up insurance policies, we've already seen it happen to the Bucks twice, right? Already losing 2 playoffs where they were the odds-on favorite entering it.
Yeah. I mean, they have the numbers this year, but they look like a paper tiger to me. I mean, every time they go on the road and play a team of quality, like the Clippers the other night, they just get run off the court. And that's really not a sign of a team that, that's going to have any staying power in the NBA playoffs. If you can't gut it up and get at least a win somewhere along the line. And I think I documented at one point how how poorly they're doing against the top teams. And last year, I believe they were doing, maybe it was 2 years ago, they did quite well. So they were poised.
And I didn't put him on the list, but I was going to say, are you in the same boat as us, where Andre Drummond to the Lakers is a good move? I really like that.
Here's what I'm doing now, and I don't even know if it's valid or not, but what I did with the Andre Drummond was I tried to look at what his numbers have been over the last couple years, right? So he's at this level. And then I look at what the Lakers have now, and what they would be replacing him with. Are they better off? Well, this Montrezl
Harrell. It's very confusing.
Good. He's
really good.
And if their idea is now they're going to have a 3-headed monster with Marc Gasol, Drummond, and Harrell. How do you say his name?
Yeah, it's Montrezl is his first. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Harrell is right.
Harrell is the last name. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay. There's a Z in there though, isn't it? Or
in the first name. Montrezl. It's Montrezl. It's Montrezl is how it's spelled. But it's Montrezl.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
But if their plan is now to split it 3 ways, then they're not. They'll be a little bit better. If their plan is to bump Gasol out of the rotation and put in Drummond, they'll be a lot better. If their plan is to move Harrell and limit his minutes, I think they'll be marginally better at best. But who knows?
Well,
you never know how it works out.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, by the way, I might write a piece on that this year. Some data that I don't know if you've looked at is the touches data that's on stats.nba.com. And one thing that fascinated me about the Cleveland Cavaliers, I now have 2 cases. So I have Kevin Love and Andre Drummond. So essentially, when Kevin Love goes from the Minnesota Timberwolves to the Cleveland Cavaliers, it looks like a coup, right? Kevin Love's great, player we've always loved. But the issue is he's really good. Yeah. Well, actually, I was going to use the Love pun in my. Well, he's old now, by the way. So to your point, he's done. And I'm going to use the Love pun in the Drummond piece, Brian, because I might say how the Cleveland Cavaliers are giving Andre Drummond too much love.
Capital Love.
Yeah, exactly. But well, not lowercase. But so here's the point. Kevin Love was a really, really good offensive player, both in terms of making threes and assists. He goes to the Cleveland Cavaliers next to LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, and shocker, his touches go down, and we can't even be mad at it. It's because LeBron James and Kyrie Irving are very, very good offensive players. He was kind of what you're saying with Andre Drummond here about playing between Montrezl and Marc Gasol. You start getting overlap. And if you look at Andre Drummond the last couple of seasons, what has actually happened is if you look at Detroit when he was really, really good, I think about 4 seasons ago, ironically, to you saying the last 3, what happened is Detroit decided that he was going to be more of an offensive presence and his touches went up. So Kevin Love from Minnesota to Cleveland, his touches went down about 20 a game. And shocker, his efficiency, his production, his wins produced went down because you're removing threes and assists, things that this player is really good at. Drummond, this defensive powerhouse, they've been trying to give the ball to more and score more, which shocks me because his value isn't going up despite the fact that his points per game have, and that's making him a worse player. So I'm actually excited for him on the Lakers.
So you're saying he's going to contain himself to what he does well, and then he's going to do it quite well.
Yeah, because you don't need to try and get Drummond to shoot a bunch. You've already got LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So this is just, he's one of the best rebounders in the NBA. So if you just start giving LeBron James and Anthony Davis and let's see, Kuzma's been doing all right, an extra shot or two. Yeah, that's huge. So could be good. And then final one, this is interesting. I'm really, really excited about Aaron Gordon to the Denver Nuggets. And part of the reason is, not sure how you feel about this, Ty, but something that has been driving us nuts is like the small ball meme, right? You find these really productive wings and you try and play them as a power forward with the thinking that they're a power forward, but they're going to shoot threes and stretch the floor. But what tends to happen is these stretch fours don't get as many layups, which are a really efficient shot, don't get as many rebounds, which are still valuable. So Aaron Gordon is this player early in his career was a small forward that looked really, really promising and has been a power forward for the remainder of his career. And he's been fine. He's been an okay power forward. He's going to the Nuggets though. The Nuggets have Michael Porter Jr., Nikola Jokic, Paul Millsap. And if you kind of want to insert Aaron Gordon into the starting core, he's essentially replacing a player named Gary Harris that we had before, who was a guard. So he's pretty much going to be a forward. And he's already a good player. In the one game he had, he was super duper productive. So I'm actually really, really high on the Nuggets for this. And the sad part to me is I've loved Gary Harris in the past, and it's injury. I mean, the number of players you can look at this, I know you're in the same boat. You look at a player, they look great. Jabari Parker would be my key example of this. As a rookie, Jabari Parker looks great. Suddenly there's this big gap where he misses a bunch of games, and after that gap, he's not as good. Gary Harris is a player like that, just been injured. And so what I'm saying is it pains me because Gary Harris was a young guard that I was like, this guy is fantastic. He's worth the money. Brian and I, back when he signed his extension, were like, this is a great signing by the Nuggets. Got injured, and he's just not come back. So it's one of those where, like, it's always rough. You have to cut your losses. You got a great player. You got a player that used to be great that's injured and they're not great anymore. And you've got a title window with a star. You cut your losses and try and win.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Well, whenever I always get frustrated when teams double down on bad bets, because we took him number one, we have to play him. We can't turn around and cut him. Yeah, you can. And you should if you find out he's not productive.
I was shocked that the Bucks actually were able to move on from Jabari Parker. I was really, really worried, right? That they were...
I was too. I thought he was going to be an albatross. But they had Giannis. He was sort of a surprise that came in between Parker and the end game. But they also had his two injuries, so they could sell that to the fans. Hey, we picked him. He was a superstar. He got injured. Now we got to let him go. But had he been this big dream pick, I think they would have had to hold on to him. But now that they had an easy out, they took it.
Yeah, I mean, between Giannis and Chris Middleton, you can move on, which was fine. And the only thing that really pains me about the Bucks is just when you're talking doubling down, like I think they lucked out early on with Brook Lopez kind of overperforming, and he's just too old and not what they need. And I
really hate him. Everyone says, "Oh, he's such a great defender," and I can't find any evidence of it. I can't find, even circumstantial evidence that he's somehow they're better off. They're better. The effective field goal percentage goes down for the other team when he leaves the court. So where's his value?
That kind of number stuff gets weird. Yeah, that kind of number stuff gets hard to quantify. But the other thing that always drives me nuts is if you have a center that's like not getting rebounds and not getting blocks and not, doing all this other stuff. And you say, yeah, but they hurt the opponent's efficiency. You go, yeah, well, guess what? If they make it really hard for the opponent to shoot, but they don't get the board, the opponent gets a second shot, and that's worse. That's worse than if they had the opponent shoot average. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. I agree. The thing that worries me though is whenever I make these kind of grand proclamations like Brook Lopez is no good, he leaves the team and then boom, all of a sudden they have no defense at all. Something like that would happen, but I just don't see the evidence.
Well, we're the kings of that around here, especially the Warriors fans. Brian and Jeremy are the ones that come out swinging and just like immediately get knocked down. Now, to be fair, I love what you said at the beginning of the show, where you're like, yeah, there's plenty of excuses. There are always excuses for things, and sometimes they're more valid than others. But yeah, I think Brian and Jeremy have come out and come swinging, and then like immediately a major injury happens or something no one saw coming happens. And the one I got, this is the one on my record that I'm just never going to live down, is I back in the day basically said Ty Lawson was a better player than Russell Westbrook, and Russell Westbrook was overrated. And this was I'm gonna give it to him.
Well, at the time you were right.
Yeah, that was true.
Wrong.
But back-to-back triple-double seasons,
I know,
even I'm saying this, I'm like, yeah, he's an MVP. So it's like for years in the comment section, Brian knows, people would be like, weren't you the guy that said Russell Westbrook?
Yeah, I know. Like, okay, that invalidates every other take you have for the rest of your life.
I was like,
you got that one wrong.
I was like, I was right at the time. Yeah.
I hate making contrarian proclamations like that are grand. The only one I ever made that paid off was I said Russell Wilson is an NFL quarterback. You know, and everyone said he was too short.
Oh, that didn't take long.
One that, and there's one guy on my Facebook, O'Malley. He always gives every year. He gives me credit. Like, do you see another Russell Westbrook? I'm like, no, that was just Wilson, a one-off. Because I had Badger season tickets and I saw him a lot. He looked like an NFL quarterback to me.
You know what's wild about Russell Wilson is he got picked in the 3rd round, right? The Seahawks had just paid big money in free agency for Matt Flynn from the Packers, and he was going to be the starter. Matt Flynn didn't start a single game. The rookie, Russell Wilson, beat him out, and he's been starting ever since.
Yeah, Flynn had the greatest scam gig going. He had one good game against the Lions. He turned it into 10 mil. He had no arm.
I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because, you know, I'm going to say we've definitely hit time and I've appreciated it. I've loved all the topics, but what I was going to say is some of the like turned an X performance into an X career. Some of those are fun. The one I can't remember, but it was an Isaiah Thomas signing back in the day. One guy had like one good playoff series, and Isaiah Thomas gave him, like, at the time, a $40 million contract, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying the Knicks when he's the Knicks GM?
Well,
yeah, but those have to be, and they have to be way more common in football, right? You have one good game, like you're saying, one good game gives you a career. I'm really curious.
You know who it is? It's that Cowboys guy who got like 2 interceptions in the Super Bowl, and then the Raiders gave him big money.
Yes, Larry Brown.
Larry Brown, yeah, thank you.
Larry Brown.
That was the biggest example I can think of, anyway.
Oh God, he was terrible, but he got 2 balls thrown to him by O'Donnell.
That's right.
Right to his chest, and he's the MVP, and he turns it into a huge contract.
Yep.
Awesome.
I mean, there was no Steeler receiver in the area when he threw him to him.
Really? That's from Roethlisberger then?
No, this is before Roethlisberger. Yeah.
Neil O'Donnell.
Yep.
Wow, this is way back then, because like Roethlisberger's been there forever.
Yeah, it's been a while now.
Yeah.
I think
I'm impressed. I didn't mean to hijack that.
Let's go back to the Bubby Brister days. How about that?
Oh God, yeah.
You guys, I'm gonna have to tap out at saying I know nothing about historical football. Even the Reeves comment you made on the Broncos, I should have known that. I grew up around that.
The only reason I knew is because I watched the NFL films of it and whatnot, and he's on there. It was so cold that day. We were out at the Northland Hotel on Military.
Oh, I love that stuff.
You gotta watch it sometimes. NFL's greatest games. Listen to him bitch. You know, we poured a coffee out and it was frozen before it hit the ground.
NFL Films is so good.
Could do that.
Yeah.
We get in the negatives, right? I don't know if it'd be before it hit the ground, but I could see that. All right.
I think it was true, actually. Well, or people tell me it's true. I don't like going out when it's that cold. I like to stay inside.
Yeah, you got heat. It's good.
HD is much better than
oh yeah,
freezing in a Packer game.
Don't need to go to Well, that's mine. When my very first game at Lambeau, I made the mistake. I did everything right: coat, scarf, hat, fleece line jeans. You can get them super cheap at Menards. Boots. Forgot.
And then it was too warm.
No. Other thing, I forgot wool socks, man. I wore normal socks, and the wind was like, "Oh my!" The wind was like, "You got this little bit between your jeans and your boots, and you're not wearing real socks. Sorry." And it was like, and this is at Lambeau, and I was like, "Yeah, like you said, rookie mistake. That was cold as all hell."
When Barb was retiring for I think the first time, or speaking of retiring for the first time at the Packers played Seattle, and it was November. It wasn't even that cold, but it was windy, and I was like, God, I got to get out of here. Like, I got to make up an excuse and get out of here. I'm freezing. So I'm not too hardy when it comes to the outdoor weather, but I'll do. I'll tough it out once in a while for a good.
And
game.
I'll say what we did there is we did a very good Midwest goodbye, right? Winded down and kept it going for another 15 minutes. But anyway, I'm just going to cut it because we're at almost an hour and a half. This has been the Boxscore Geeks show.
I'm
no, not a problem. It was me. It was, if we listen back, if we do the usage statistics, I guarantee it.
How many times did Ty attempt to talk over Dre?
He is pounding the rock.
Yeah. No, it's me. I was going to say that the first time we met Ty,
hazard.
The first time we met Ty, like we went out to lunch, and I at the end of it, I was like, I talk too much. Same rookie mistake. So anyway, and I keep it going on the podcast. But anyway.
I never mind that.
All right. Well, good to hear. And we'll have to have you back on. We'll have to find better reasons because first time we were supposed to have you on was for the Bucks winning a title. Second time we were supposed to have you on, which we did. We actually got you. I got you to commit before, was to talk March Madness. And of course, you noticed we didn't talk how amazing. We didn't talk how Ty's picks are winning every bracket out there.
I was just glancing over, and Michigan struggling with UCLA.
Yes.
Ty's
West Coast. Let's go.
Ty's ocean liner sees an iceberg.
Yeah. I was going to say we have to get you to commit because if we try and get you to come on the show to brag about one of your picks, you're going to say never mind.
I called it 3 weeks ago.
That's right.
In my bathroom.
So we will definitely have you back on.
All
anything
right,
you want to plug in? Anything you want to plug in particular? So Ty Willingans, do you want to plug Twitter? Obviously, as you mentioned, your site currently is barrybasketballratings.blogspot.com. You might be moving that. Do you want to shout out Twitter or any other follows there?
Yeah, at Ty Willingans, no H.
Okay. And yeah, definitely, like we've mentioned, one of the most prolific basketball followers. We are glad you are back in the game. That is huge.
Thank you, man. And thanks for your kind words. And thanks for inviting me on. I had a great time.
And thanks for coming on. And we'll have you on again. And I'll just try and cut it short. Boxscore Geeks, boxscoregeeks.com, the Boxscore Geeks show on all of your major podcast aggregators, twitch.tv/nerd numbers, and then produced by Boxscore Brian on Twitter, Brian Foster. Thanks so much. That's our show. I'll cut it off and then I'll see if we talk after, Brian.